Welcome to Conscious Profits Unfiltered. This is your host, Sebastian Nam.
What up, fam? Today I had on First Light Farms founder Jason Ross, who we call Jace. If you're into high quality, top-notch grass-fed beef, I'm sure you're already a fan of First Light, a brand that can be found in Bristol Farms, Lassens, and tons of other natural grocers, and now even at Ralph's in some areas, with some of the top cuts in the world found only in their steak club, and just a few of some of the highest end steak restaurants in the world. First Light Farms was founded by Jace and a couple of friends frustrated with the traditional meat value chain. They had cut their teeth in the industry and were unhappy with the lack of transparency and the commodity mindset. They also identified a problem they thought they could solve: beef with the consistency, tenderness, and succulence of grain-fed, raised on grass without any nasty and unhealthy inputs. So Jace and his homies set about inventing 100% grass-fed Wagyu beef, and they created a value chain to seamlessly connect consumers who care with groups of like-minded farmers. Guys, there's a reason why Forbes calls it the best beef in the world. If you're someone who's interested in regenerative farming, conscious consumerism, or perhaps just the best freaking steak in the world, we got it all in this episode. And hey, if you get value from the show, please share it with a friend, tag me on social, and definitely subscribe. It means the world to me. I appreciate you guys spending time with us. Enjoy the show. Jace, welcome to the show. How's it going?
All good. Thanks, Sebastian.
Wonderful. Great to have you. It looks like a beautiful morning over there in New Zealand.
Yep. 9:30 Friday morning. That sun behind me is the first sun of Friday. You'll get it tomorrow.
Love that. Wonderful. Wonderful. Jace, I start off my podcast by asking my guests, what was your last oh shit moment? First thing that comes to mind, last oh shit moment.
Yesterday, when one of my boys went down with blood all over his face on the rugby field.
Oh shit. That is a proper oh shit. How's he doing? Is he all right?
He's okay. Yeah. Wiped it off and carried back on.
That's why he plays rugby.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. That's a good oh shit there. I've asked a lot of oh shits. That's a good one, Jace.
Yeah.
So Jace, I want to acknowledge you right away. I tend to do this at the end of shows, but I want to acknowledge you right away for you and your company's commitment to ethical raising of cattle, commitment to quality, regenerative farming practices. And I'm super excited to dive more into these subjects because it's really a conscious business model and it's what I'm passionate about. But first, I want to ask you, was there a time in the past when ethical raising of animals wasn't really a thing in your life? Or is this something that's always been there for you as a kid?
No, I grew up in the mainstream meat business. So we don't have grain-fed beef in New Zealand, but we have commodity grass-fed. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth. I certainly appreciated all the learnings. Never really fell in love with the commodity mindset. So it was just a matter of time, I think, before we sort of I transitioned into something that was, I could say, just a little bit deeper, a little bit more robust.
What does that mean exactly for someone who hasn't heard that term, commodity mindset?
I suppose the easiest way of explaining it would be the difference between growing to order and harvesting. So commodity businesses will go and buy off the open market. So there's thousands and thousands of farms in New Zealand and thousands of farmers, and they might not have loyalty to one particular company that processes their cattle. So the meat companies therefore go and harvest. They just pay a price. The best price on the day gets the livestock. And some of that livestock's fantastic and some of it's not so good. And commodity businesses are set up to just deal with the full range. Whereas in today's iteration of First Light, we grow to order. So we're very specific about every single piece of the puzzle, and because we've got a very specific outcome we're trying to achieve. So you can't become a grass-fed Wagyu supplier to First Light unless you're part of the business, because we're just not designed to deal with stuff that we don't want.
Great. Thanks for that description. Yeah, absolutely. Jace, the more and more you start to dig and learn about American history when it comes to its farming practices, it's pretty scary. Even if I just look into like glyphosate, for example, this is just something I know a little bit about. Something that was discovered in the 50s and in the 70s was essentially adopted by Monsanto, right? And marked as Roundup as a herbicide. And although in the 80s, there was already data showing that this was carcinogen. Basically, it became rampant in the 90s, early thousands, and you basically find it everywhere. I believe there was a study and just a few years ago done that glyphosate is found in 95% of all Americans' urine, which is just a crazy statistic. And just over the last couple of years, we've started to see some true progress when it comes to settlements and lawsuits and things that are happening that are going to curb that. Do you see this situation is analogous when it comes to grain-fed animals and how animals are raised for consumption in the United States?
Look, I think what changed the American meat industry was corn subsidies in the 50s. And what corn enables is highly optimized, which is a euphemism for cheap and cheerful protein production. So the risk that comes with that is that you gain a whole lot of IP around, we would say, artificial animal production, and you lose a whole lot of IP around natural animal production. So I think the answer probably to the question is yes.
What do you mean by that, by the IP?
It's really, really hard to grow grass-fed cattle and produce a kick-ass outcome. Like really, really hard. It's like, driving a super high quality race car. You've got to be at the top of your game to win. Because with an industrialized system, you take out all of the variables, not all of the variables, but most of them, right? You take out animal health by giving them lots of antibiotics. You take out fat burning by standing them still. You take out the weather. You eliminate a whole lot of the challenges that are inherent in the grass-fed pastoral system. One is a lot harder, and for some crazy reason, which is called marketing. So it's not a crazy reason. It's, good, well done to the marketers. Grain-fed beef became more expensive than grass-fed beef, when in reality, the disciplines and capability required to deliver a really good quality grass-fed animal, they're chalk and cheese.
So that was, in terms of the pricing, that it was actually more expensive. That was in the beginning?
Well, until 5 years ago,
okay,
grain-fed beef was more expensive than grass-fed, and the reason for that, I think, is pretty simple: is that grain-fed beef is really, really consistent. It's consistently tender and juicy. It's not particularly flavorful relative to grass-fed, and some people would say that that's a good thing because the grass-fed is quite a strong flavor. But people were willing to pay a premium for consistency. But that comes at an enormous cost if you happen to be the animal, as an example.
Is this just an American thing that we went so hardcore into grain-fed and really looking at this cheap and cheerful production that you're talking about? Or is this really a worldwide phenomenon that started happening as basically we wanted to just feed more humans and profit over everything else sort of mentality?
I can't speak to the, profit over everyone else and all that sort of stuff, because that's sort of outside my wheelhouse. But in terms of, did Americans invent grain-fed beef production extremely and do it extremely efficiently? Yes. Did you export that IP around the world? Yes. Is the rest of the world now where they can doing it, like South America, for example? Yes. So, yes, you did. And I think you're also going to export the solution, because grass-fed consumption is growing in North America, and you are exporting the health and well-being benefits of grass-fed to those places that are, have followed you into grain-fed. So we're we've seen the re-emergence, and I call it a re-emergence of grass-fed because all our grandparents grew up on grass-fed. Anyone who was born, who lived pre the 50s was eating grass-fed, so it's not like this is a new thing. There's just been a moment in time when grain-fed became popular, and so I think grass-fed is just making its comeback, and I think America's doing just as good a job at exporting the idea of grass-fed as they did at exporting the idea of grain-fed.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I'm originally from Argentina, so this is definitely something that that has changed a lot, even in South America, like you said, right? It caught on significantly there. And again, I'm not an expert in that, but I would have to say that there's something to be said about the consistency and removing the variables, like you were saying, and definitely having to do with profit, right? For a lot of people that are really just, farmers that are looking to make money. But moving on from that.
The cynic would say that, of course, you come from New Zealand, you are an advocate for grass-fed because your climate and your terrain doesn't lend itself to grain-fed beef, and that's a fair statement. South America, Australia, Midwest of the US, they are custom designed for growing crops that you can cut and carry to an animal. So logically, if you happen to be on those Pampas plains in Argentina and parts of Uruguay and Brazil for that matter, and you can grow maize or corn and cut and cart it to an animal, and the whole net it's more profitable. Pretty hard to argue against why you might not do that.
Yeah, understood there. Jace, so tell us a little bit about First Light Farms. How did that start? What was it that inspired you to begin this journey of yours?
The beef. So we're a venison business and a beef business. So if I was just to pick on the beef side of things, what inspired us was an opportunity or an unfulfilled need, which was for that American consumer who was transitioning back to, or for maybe discovering grass-fed beef, to give them an amazing eating experience. The downside to grass-fed beef is that it is inconsistent, which means it's quite oftentimes dry and chewy and has got a very strong flavor. And we knew, well, we put our money on black. We said this re-emergence of grass-fed is not going to be a fad, it's going to be a long-term trend, and therefore we are well positioned in New Zealand to produce the world's best grass-fed beef. So that American consumer who has made the decision to transition from grain to grass is going to have a consistently tender, juicy experience. And that's why we invented grass-fed Wagyu beef, because there are multiple ways to create great grass-fed beef, but the great leveler is marbling, which is those flecks of fat inside the muscle. And Wagyu is an animal that is genetically predisposed to marbling. So I guess long-winded answer to your question, we created First Light and created grass-fed Wagyu beef, which we're still pretty much the only company in the world that does, to give a North American consumer who wanted grass-fed beef an amazing eating experience, not an 8-ounce health supplement.
Jace, I actually wrote down here the Oxford definition of Wagyu is a breed of cattle of Japanese origin from which is obtained tendered marble beef, typically containing a high percentage of unsaturated fat. And then there's other sources using the term Kobe beef and Wagyu interchangeably. Can you clarify the difference between the two, if there is one?
Yeah, there definitely is one. So in Japanese, Wagyu is a breed, Angus, Hereford, Wagyu, Simmental. Wa means Japan and Gyu means cow. So Japanese cow. So it's a Japanese cattle breed. Kobe is a place. So Kobe Wagyu is a bit like saying Los Angeles Angus.
Got it.
Kobe beef, they grow great Wagyu in Kobe, and they probably argue they grow the best. But then the the guys in Miyazaki would say, which is another place in Japan, would say that Miyazaki beef is better than Kobe beef. So Kobe is I think it probably came out of the Second World War. Americans had been in Kobe, came back and said, hey, this amazing beef, Kobe beef stuck. Kobe is not. Kobe is a place. It's a seaport in Japan. Wagyu is a breed.
Got it. So they had some good branding and marketing there.
Yeah.
And Jace, there's you're telling us a little bit about why you started as First Light Farms and this need and this sort of resurgence for grass fed in the States. And really there are aspects of your business that are conscious business aspects, conscious capitalistic aspects that are ingrained in the DNA of it, that you haven't mentioned yet, in regards to what that looks like in terms of the collective of farmers and your relationship to farming families. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because, people in this city, if you grew up in like Los Angeles, for example, or New York or a large city, and you never really had experience with farms. Hey guys, I just want to remind you, if you want to find more content like this, you can visit sebastiannaum.com. That's Sebastian, NAUM.com. You can also get a ton of other marketing resources from myself and my agencies, ranging from SEO to social media, influencer marketing, branding, web development, and more. Again, that's sebastiannaum.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show. Farmers are this sort of imagined humans that you have in your brain, and you don't really even know what they're like and what they do. Tell us a little bit about that, about maybe what really gives for the livelihood of farming families and what that's all like in ingrained in your business.
So go back to the earlier description of the commodity meat business, which makes up the majority of the meat business globally. It's a very confrontational industry. So the farmers are disengaged from the meat processors who own the market. And when there's lots of grass and the farmer doesn't have to sell, or the market's, the market is strong and the farmer doesn't have to sell, then they will hold back and hold the meat processor to ransom. And when the farmers get short on cash or feed or some other environmental impact, the processors will pin them to the wall and pay them as little as possible. It's a very confrontational industry.
Yeah.
And it's a generalization, but that is actually how the majority of the industry works. We decided that we would turn that on its head and prioritize getting as much value out of the animal as we could and giving as much of that to the farmer as they deserved or as was fair. So we talk about equitable distribution of value along the value chain. And we talk about no one in the value chain that doesn't add value, because that's the other problem with the meat industry, is it is full of participants who might not be adding in a huge amount of value. So we limit the participants in the supply chain to the bare minimum between the consumer and the farmer, and we ensure that the farmer has transparency to the value that's being created and they're getting their fair share of it. And the way we went about doing that was we made the farmers shareholders in the company.
How exactly? How is that the case?
They just have shares like any other shareholder, and they are significant enough shareholders that they get to see the profitability of the business and the distribution of value along the value chain. So they might not actively get involved in the trucking or transport negotiations, but they do understand that of the $100 that they get from the market, 8 of it's going to trucking or something. They're just active participants.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and what that does, when you feel like you're being treated fairly, you become very engaged. And when you feel like you're treated unfairly, you become your prickles go up. So we have the opposite relationship to our farmers to what a big meat company might.
Yeah, that's a really awesome concept. So essentially, if I was distributing strawberries and I worked with 100 different farmers of strawberries, I would offer them shares of my company, of the overall distribution and selling of my brand.
Yes, what it does is so the team that, it's quite a complicated process, meat, well, farming animals all the way through to having them members of state clubs and, in great grocery stores and all that sort of stuff. So we've got a big supply chain team. Their job is to maximize the value from the animal, and the farmer's job is to maximize the quality of the animal, and it's mutually assured success or destruction. It's just a short, focused supply chain with an equitable distribution of value.
That's wonderful. Yeah. What is what's the cycle of cattle in when it comes to pasture raised, grass fed versus grain fed?
I can't speak super clearly for grain fed, but my understanding is that grain fed animals are processed somewhere between sort of 18 and low 20 months. Whereas a grass-fed animal, or our grass-fed animals, are more like 27, 28 months. Quite a big difference. Takes a lot longer. There's not anywhere near as much energy in grass as there is in cornflakes. And you burn a lot of that energy off when you're walking up and down hills on open fields than you do if you're standing still in a CAFO.
So essentially, for the animal, you got a happier and longer life either way.
Yeah, you do. It's all, you could argue it's not a hugely longer life, but I can tell you it'll feel like a lot longer life when you're enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also if you look at it from a percentage standpoint, it is actually quite a lot longer.
Yeah, it is.
Quite a lot longer, for sure. Is that part of what, is this why it is much more expensive nowadays? Is it because of that in part?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of cost of production and supply and demand. I mean, for us, ours is more expensive because the energy that's required to put marbling into meat off grass is significant. So farmers have to be at the absolute top of their game in terms of making sure every mouthful is an energy-rich one, and they've got all sorts of mechanisms to do that. But suffice to say that you've got to be extremely well planned, and you've got to have really good quality pasture all the time, which means you're on the best quality land. So our Wagyu are occupying the best of the best land in New Zealand in order to get that marbling in the meat.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot of the times when we're thinking about it from a health perspective too, there's I've had someone else on the podcast in the past talking about grass-fed versus grain-fed and what that means from a health perspective, and it makes it really a huge difference, and in a very, very positive way. And a lot of the times we have this sort of understanding that healthier is more expensive. But the truth of the matter is, more expensive maybe right now today, but what is the price of your health in the long term, right? Whether that is a shorter lifespan, disease, hospital bills, et cetera, et cetera. So I see it as a very much worth expensive today sort of thing versus in the long term from a quality and health standpoint.
I think the reality of the matter is that things that are done naturally just cost more because they take more time and they haven't got the artificial interventions that is, nicest possible way cutting we can't cut the corners,
right?
So it costs more.
Yeah,
and you're right. Ultimately, short term that might be a bit painful. Longer term, you'll reap the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like so many things in life. So, definitely. There's so talk to me a little bit about venison and other game animals. Is there anything from a nutritional standpoint about venison and other game animals, from an environmental standpoint, that we should be essentially raising or consuming more game animals?
Yeah, we say it was the original fast food. Humans have been eating, let's just say deer, for example, since we came down out of the trees. It has been in pretty much all cultures around the world the original meat. So we are biologically designed to get the most out of them. They also happen to be the antithesis of Wagyu beef. They're extremely lean. So venison, as an example, most cuts on a deer are 1% fat. And the great thing about venison is that it's 4 times as tender as beef. So it's lean and tender. So yeah, I'd say it's the nutrients from wild game are very bioavailable because we've been doing it for so long. And from a health and well-being perspective, it's a good story. And I think the other one is probably some of these wild game animals that we're consuming have become pests. So it's not a bad idea to utilize what has become something we don't want, rather than just protect your native forests, culling them. You might as well cull them and use that protein.
Super interesting. Jace, I love learning about regenerative farming. There's a lot of talk about it. Why don't you give us your definition of it?
I think we've always been regenerative, and so we were kind of probably regenerative before it was a thing. For us, we're learning what the new definition is, and making minor adjustments to make sure we comply with the generally accepted definition. Pretty much what it is to us is ensuring that you are protecting the soil, and it's linked to carbon. While regenerative doesn't focus specifically on carbon is plays a big role in it, but it's pasture and soil management to ensure that, because that's where it all starts. That's kind of the building blocks of certainly grass-fed protein, but also plants for plant-based consumption. So the integration of animals and plants together in an ecosystem, and primarily where I think we are ahead of others, is we have determined that we are designing for a future with a few less animals in it, or with less animals in it in general. So big part of our regenerative definition is getting more value per animal to reduce the number of animals required for a farmer to earn a living, and net that's a better outcome for the environment.
So with meat consumption playing a big role in environmental impact, you see this is essentially the solution in regards to meat consumption and its impact on the environment is through regenerative farming.
Look, our worldview is that plants and animals have coexisted forever, and they should continue to coexist forever. Where you get bias in the wrong direction is when you have too many. When you have too many of anything, when you have too many plants and not enough animals, you have a problem. Have a look at, the big green desert that is in the middle of America. Too many plants, not enough animals, not good. On the flip side, if you have too many grass-fed Wagyu animals on one farm, you will degrade the soil. So fundamentally, our view is that the two should work in harmony, and the risk is that you go too far in either direction. And the great indicator for when you're getting it right is the quality of the soil, because the soil, there's nowhere to hide. The soil will tell you if you've had too many plants and not enough animals, then you've taken too much carbon out of it. If you've got too many animals and not enough plants, then you take the carbon out of it for another way. That you'll release all the carbon by overgrazing. So it's all about getting the balance right, and it's hard. The easiest way to do it, or the best way to do it, we believe, is to get as much value from an animal as we possibly can, so the farmer doesn't have to push the limit of how many he's got on his farm.
That's so fascinating. It's fascinating that so much can be told through the story, through carbon and through our soil, and how much of an impact that has on everything. It's such a domino effect. It's truly fascinating, and it's incredible that I love that you guys are paying so much attention to that balance, such a careful balance that has to happen.
It's not just carbon, though. I think we get caught up with carbon. I mean, carbon's actually, we've got to be careful with the term. We should be using the term greenhouse gases, because carbon is actually the building block of life. We're trying to put carbon into soils. Carbon's a really, really good thing. But for us, soil quality is a mixture of how much organic matter, carbon, is in there, but also what the biodiversity is in there, how many worms per spadeful, the interaction of all of the different insects and not having too many of one. But yes, to answer your question, or to support your statement, it's if you get that bit right, then all else follows.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you see any time in the near future where more cattle producers and farmers are going to start going this route, Jace, the route that you guys have gone, a very conscious route, one that produces a high quality meat, one that helps the environment and hopefully starts to help us curb these ecological crises that we're having?
I think farmers are generally smart, capable people who want to do good. So they will all want regenerative, by their standards, which is the right balance of animals on a healthy soil and grass. They all want that, and so if you give them the opportunity to do that, most farmers that I know are land custodians. They're not this ogre who's trying to use the land for their own benefit. They're typically custodians who are looking to protect it for the next generation, is my observation. So I think that you give them the opportunity to do that, and they will pretty much all do that. It comes down to the consumer. The consumer needs to get real when it comes to the cost of protein, and accept that they should eat less of it, and it should be better quality. So no more of this, what I see a lot, not only in North America, but all over the place, which is half the steak left on the plate. Order half the size steak and eat every last piece of it. And the sticker shock of the cost of it won't be as significant because you're eating less of it. And it will be net positive, which will enable the farmer to be a better custodian. So yes, I think to answer your question, I think there are lots of people doing this, and there'll be a lot more doing it if given the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I say all the time is you vote with your dollars. So consumers drive so much of that market. So the more and more we can educate our consumers and we can be educated as consumers, the more of these practices we're going to drive, which is exciting. So and from what I see, thanks to also technology and the way we can disperse knowledge, is that more and more people are finding out about it and are making choices consciously. And that's driving those practices to improve, which is super exciting to see. So Jace, now, bottom line, I've had a lot of chances to try First Light steaks, whether it's buying it at Sprouts. I've had a chance to have the steak club, and it is freaking incredible. I've had a lot of steak in my life. I absolutely love it. Love it. Love it. So obviously, I'll be sharing all of the links here in the podcast for people to connect with First Light Farms and all that good stuff. Any words on the taste of what the steak club is and how people can buy your meat?
We had an event that you were at where I asked the room, someone help me define give me some words to describe grass-fed Wagyu beef. And the one that came through the strongest was clean. Which is not a great descriptor for the flavor, honestly, but it sort of was what everybody felt. So I guess that's meaningful. And clean, I think, means that when you eat it, you feel good, which would suggest that it probably is good. And the supply chain's clean. It's real. It's not. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in some parts of the meat industry. There's no smokes and mirrors here. And the Steak Club is really the sort of the pinnacle. Our absolute goal is to sell meat directly to consumers, because if you're a member of the Steak Club, you can email the farmer, and that's as close as we're ever going to get to success, which is joining the group of really caring farmers with a group of really caring consumers. And so, the Steak Club's really, really important for us, and technology has enabled that. We can have two people, one growing it, one consuming it, talking to each other, and then we can seamlessly deliver that meat to their doorstep once a month. And it's a win-win. And as we go into the whole sort of next chapter of our evolution, which is better using the leather, better using the livers as micronutrients for B12, better using the collagen, and using every piece of the animal, then the person who's eating the great steak gets an opportunity to buy collagen for their smoothie or for their coffee from the same animal, knowing that it's also lived a great life. It's the best quality that money can buy. That's really been the Steak Club, and that whole connection directly with the consumer is our definition of success.
That's super cool. I love that. That's amazing, Jace. Is there anything coming up in terms of other products like you were just mentioning, and in terms of collagen, or really maximizing the animals?
Yep. This year we're going to bring out 3 products. One is the collagen. Another one is the micronutrients. So it's this growing awareness that 90% of all the vitamins you buy are synthetic, created in a lab.
Wow.
and not bioavailable. So if you want to get B12, if you're short on vitamin A, then taking a freeze-dried, milled, encapsulated beef liver capsule, not only will you get all the B12 and the A, and the all the squillion other micronutrients, but your body will be able to absorb them properly. So, and then the last one's pet food. We create a lot of bones, and that makes for an opportunity for lots of pet food.
That's great. Well, there's a lot of pets in the States, and more and more pets need great quality food just like we do. So that's super exciting. Jace, I'm going to let you go on this one last question. You're clearly a conscious leader for what you do and what you stand for, and everything you guys do at First Light Farms is truly inspirational. What do you find that are your top 2 traits that a conscious leader must embody today?
Stick to your principles would be one. I mean, there's so many opportunities for cutting corners. And I give all my staff the clear mandate that when they reach the T intersection and there's an easy way and a right way, that they take the right way, even if it comes at a bit of a cost, financial or time. I think you have to be a little bit of a futurist, because you might see something that others either don't see or do see and feel uncomfortable with. And you've got to be true to your conviction and stick to it. Even like when we first started producing super high quality grass-fed beef, there were a lot of naysayers that this was a stupid idea from within. Some came from inside our families. But you've got to stick to your conviction. And when everybody says no, and you still truly believe it to be the right thing to do, you got to just, you got to have thick skin.
I love that. That's the first time I've heard that one. I've been asking people that for a long time. So, Jace, thank you so much for being on. Appreciate you. Keep doing what you do. Really, truly a conscious leader, and love your company and what you guys are doing. We need more people like you and more companies like First Light Farms. So thanks again for being on. Very much appreciate you.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. You know, it takes a lot to put these things together, but I truly love doing it. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, and you listen to it on audio podcast, please take some time to give it a review. It would really mean a lot to me. And if you watch the video, please go ahead and just click subscribe and share it with somebody that you think would like it. It would really mean the world to me, and it helps keep the show alive. Visit sebastiannaum.com for more content and follow me on Instagram at sebnaum. That's SEBNAUM. Thanks again for spending your time with me. I know it is valuable. I hope you have a great rest of the day and week. Till next time.